Hello and welcome to EnlightenMental podcast. Again, this is EnlightenMental 1.4, and today we're going to be talking about how it takes a really grown person to cry over penguins and to still go out and be badass. Stay tuned. I've named this episode Crying Over Penguins because I found myself a while back fighting myself over watching a documentary wherein I was very, very emotionally moved by the plight of some penguins. You guys may or may not have heard of it. It was on the BBC, the documentary that is. If you happen to be in the UK, you may or may not know what I'm talking about. However, it was quite moving. And then I found myself thinking to myself, why are you stopping yourself from showing any emotion about this? Why are you saying, oh god damn it, I'm not gonna cry over some penguins? What's the big deal about crying over penguins struggling to survive in the Arctic? I might have got that one wrong. I don't know if it's the Arctic or the Antarctic, but it doesn't matter. Why are you fighting with yourself over something as simple as, shedding a couple of tears because they actually died? That was just the beginning of a thought pattern that kind of carried on over the next couple of months. And then I got to a place where, particularly recently, I was thinking about how I deal with certain things. And a lot of the time I deal with things by writing, but when you don't have the time to write and you've got so much to say that you don't even know where to start and your hand won't move, how do you release your emotions in a healthy way? Culture seems to tell us that it's weak to show emotion. Depending on where you're from, generally, emotion is not really considered a thing that is admirable or strong. It's not associated with strength. It's associated with weakness. Then, of course, you've got the things going on in your own mind. Your mind telling you to get it together, because if you don't have it together, that's when you fall to pieces and show emotion. And then, of course, you've got your experience telling you that emotions make you vulnerable. And of course, it all boils back down to survival instincts, and none of us want to be vulnerable. Now, why these three things are untrue is because, one, a lack of emotion equates to a lack of humanity. We are humans, and the emotions that exist in us are there because that is actually a part of who we are, how we function, how we understand the world and interact with it and think about what to do next. People insisting that this is how they live in society are either lying or deeply lacking in self-awareness. They're not aware of how they express their own emotions, but that means that they're definitely expressing their emotions. People tend to make the mistake of thinking that showing anger is not weakness, it's not showing emotion, but actually anger is an emotion. Conversely, they like to say or think that tears are a weak emotion. And that would be what one would consider as a sign of being weak in general. I disagree, because it is not strength to lose your temper in a situation. In fact, that is a lack of control, which shows a lack of strength. And it is not weak to be able to express joy or pain or frustration in something that is completely natural. I mean, it definitely depends on the outcome of your expression. whether I would consider it weakness or strength. But I believe that strength is the ability to be able to control, the ability to control and use your emotion effectively. And to understand that feelings are fickle. Yes, you will feel this now because that's your body's immediate response to this thing that has just happened. And maybe you will continue to feel this way for a while. But the feeling is not it's not an accurate representation of what's really happening to you. Growth or maturity within yourself is the ability to control and release or express your emotions without self-judgment or self-deprecation. Which now leads me to point 2. Because if your mind is telling you that based on the perception created by society or your upbringing or your influences as you grew up, that having or expression of your emotions is a sign of not having things together, then we need to do some reprogramming. The two things are linked. A lack of emotion, culture telling you that it's weak to show your emotion, and then your upbringing or your influences being ingrained in your mind to the point where you think that you have to not show emotion to show that you have it all together. I'll tell you what having it all together means. Being mature enough to understand what's going on with you and knowing how to care for yourself so that you can carry on functioning. I'm going to give a little illustration. If you were to experience a lot of difficulty in life or in a particular period of your life, and that led you to be frustrated, and this frustration led you to wonder what your next step could possibly be, and you kept that all to yourself and you never spoke to anyone, what do you think would happen? I spoke to a friend of mine recently, and I talked about how there's this expression called, or this way of describing this type of behavior. We call it bottling things up. You have lots of different things happening in your life. That's a bunch of fizzy drink that's gone into your bottle. And you have more additional pressures from the external world thrown back into the bottle as well. You're keeping all these things to yourself, and your feelings about this are the bubbles. And you add more circumstances to the bubble, to the bottle, and you keep it capped because you're like, I've got this all together. However, that bottle has a limited, and when I say limited, I don't mean it's small, I just mean that it's a finite volume. There's only so much it can take. Then you've kept it capped, and obviously there's bubbles of gas in there as well, which, like I said, are your emotions. And then you'll have one crazy idiot come from nowhere, shake the bottle. And that would be someone, trying to wind you up, or someone just doing something really stupid that really, really gets on your nerves. And that would be what they call the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. But in this case, they've shaken the bottle and the cork comes popping off and everything flies out and everybody's like, whoa, where the heck did all of that come from? A lack of control. Bottling is not control, because at some point you will lose control. Now this leads me to point 3. Your experience tells you that emotions make you vulnerable, but that's untrue. In only a certain kind of way. I'll explain. You have, from experience, known that if you cried in front of someone, either they'd think you, or they'd feel awkward, or they'd make fun, or they would have some sort of response to you releasing tears, or showing that you're angry, or showing that you have a feeling of some sort, has sometimes led to people taking advantage. And that can hurt someone to a point where they build walls around themselves to try and protect themselves. But actually, the only person that becomes hurt by those walls is the person that built them, because you build a wall around yourself and lock yourself in such that you can't move. You're trapped. So you're in there with all these negative emotions, sometimes in there with all these things you're dealing with, and you're all alone and no one can get through to you to help you. So not only do you close out the people who will harm you or who will try to harm you, that's a different thing for a different day, but you also close out the people who could potentially have helped you. It's a choice. That's another thing about being grown and about being mature. Making choices, making weighed up, calculated, educated, wise choices. Your experience that has told you that emotions make you vulnerable. Vulnerability is not always a bad thing. Being vulnerable with the right person can lead to you finding someone who can support you, offer you help, offer you advice, and you can make progress that you never knew was possible, because in your own head, you had a limited amount of knowledge before you spoke to that person, but then they've increased your knowledge. They've told you, well, looking at it from this angle might help you get around this better. I say all of this to say this. If you want to cry because you feel frustrated, you don't have to show anyone. You don't have to burst into tears in front of the office, because I would consider that being a situation where your bottle has been shaken and the cork popped off. No, before you get to that point, every once in a while, release some of the gas inside that bottle. Situations will come into our lives and fill the bottle sometimes. But if we don't release the gas, that's a terrible, terrible, terrible analogy. But if we don't release the bubbles that are inside us in the form of emotions, we have a buildup that becomes very uncomfortable. The truth of the matter is that at some point, the liquid that went into the bottle will be poured out, as in the situations in your life will change. But what you don't want to do is hold everything inside as though those things belong there, or as though they are permanent, or as though this is not a finite situation. Every single situation in your life has an expiration date. And I want you to understand that to cope, to get through that time, you first of all have to tell yourself that, yes, this is temporary. So how I'm feeling is a response to this temporary thing that is fairly enough. Tell yourself this is justified. It is an infuriating situation. This is a frustrating situation. This is an upsetting situation. This is exactly what it is. However, my feelings are making it feel like it's worse than it is. Honor those feelings. Tell those feelings, yeah, you're valid. You're just a response to this thing that's really genuinely happening to me. But then, after you've said all the crap you need to say, as in you've expressed all those things, I personally like to lock myself in a room somewhere, just stay away from everybody so I don't say things I don't want to say. And I write down what I want to say. But if my hands can't do the thing of the writing, I take myself out of the situation. Sometimes I'll listen to some music to kind of get my mind off things, or sometimes I will just talk. Talk to yourself. Say all the crap that you're thinking in your head. Get it out. Once it's out and it's either visible because you wrote it, or you've heard yourself say it and you're like, well, that's a load of nonsense, because you're much more mature than that and you're stronger than that and you understand what logic is, or you have a logical mind. You think to yourself, okay, so that didn't make any sense, because I know I am a stronger person than this, and I know I have the ability to do this, and I know that my problem really is just that this and this need to happen for me to be able to do this. Or I need to deal with this person in this and this way, and maybe I just need to have a conversation with that person and I can move forward. And then obviously two ways I've suggested, two ways of handling it. Talking it out loud, then talking it through, being the person for yourself to talk you through to the logical side of things again, and telling yourself how to actually deal with things, Or the third one, and this is when we come back to the area of vulnerability. Part of being grown up and part of being mature is knowing who to talk to. Sometimes you will have people to talk to, sometimes you won't. If you happen to have, I've mentioned in one of my previous podcasts that you need to be aware of the people around you and know that there are people that you can go to. I think that was actually the very last one. I said, don't stay alone. Don't isolate yourself. There are people you can talk to, and you don't think to yourself that you're going to be burdening them. If you're worried about that, make the disclaimer at the beginning of your conversation. I know that sounds crazy, and people don't really have conversations like that, but then I think if we were all more self-aware and more able to actually be honest with each other, we would know what to expect. Not that we would know what to expect, but you kind of like, everybody knows what to expect. Everybody knows how they're going to handle this, if that makes any sense. You say you're about to say something that might be a bit polarizing, that might be a bit awkward. If that person is like, whoa, I don't think I can handle this, then of course don't proceed. But most of the time it'll just be that you've picked the right person to talk to. And that's another thing I'll talk about in a different podcast. But you picked the right person to talk to. You've said to them, I really need to talk to you about something quite important, and I'm struggling in this area. And you don't want to pick somebody who's going to judge you. And you don't want to judge yourself. You need to be non-judgmental towards yourself. If you feel like that person's going to judge you, they're not the right person to talk to. That's the truth. But yeah, you talk to the person, you let out what you're thinking. I'm like, this is what I'm thinking. And most of the time, someone will tell you, that someone will tell you, well, that's not right. That's nonsense because you're this and you're that. And sometimes it helps to hear from other people what they believe you to be capable of, in the way that you're much more capable than you think you are. And sometimes it helps to hear someone give you advice that actually it had occurred to you to do those things which you thought you weren't making sense, so you didn't do those things. You just need a little push in the right direction. There's always someone available to give you a push. It could even be a stranger. And I'm not saying don't go to random strangers at the bus stop and in the street and start telling them your secrets. That's not what I said, but just saying that there are people out there that you can talk to. What I'm going to start doing on my podcast and on my website as well is I might start leaving links to places where you can actually have anonymous conversations with people and express yourself. And there are people who have actually volunteered to listen, or who are being paid to listen, who will happily listen to you for free and kind of give you somebody to talk to and somebody who can give you feedback, because these people are giving up their time to actually help people out. Maybe because just like you, at some point they needed someone to talk to, and they either didn't have one or they did have one, and that's why they realized the value of being able to provide that for someone else. So this is me saying all that to say it's okay to cry over penguins. Express your feelings. Just don't let your feelings control you. You control your feelings. You know how to handle them. And know that they're not fact. They're just a response to something going on around you. This has been EnlightenMental Podcast, and I hope I have been of some help. Until next time, take care.